We're here today, of course, to say thanks and to remember our good friend Richards Archambault in whatever ways we feel compelled to think of his life. We want to celebrate that life, think of that life, and whatever we know about that life. I know that life as giving, as service, as energy, as laughter, as this longhouse, as friendship. Each of you knows of that life in your own ways. We'll begin today with a Lakota prayer that's on your program and move directly to the serious prayer of the drum, which Frank Merrill and his family will bless us with. Wakantonka, great mystery, teach me how to trust my heart, my mind, my intuition, my inner knowing, the senses of my body, the blessings of my spirit. Teach me to trust these things so that I may enter my sacred spaces and love beyond fear, and thus walk in balance with the passing of each glorious sun. combination of that drum beat and the silence of the room, I think, was exactly what we needed there. And Richard, I'm sure, has felt it. Richard appeared here in Eugene around 2003. As far as I know, it was Frank Merrill, who had been working here for a long time and was transitioning out of his job here, who brought Richard into our midst. We were forever thankful for that. And Mary Spildy, the president of Lane Community College, was, along with the rest of us, a great recipient of his energy, and she'll now say a few words.
Good afternoon, and welcome to our Long Nights. It is an honor to have the celebration of life for Richard Archambault in this sacred space, which he was so instrumental in creating. I can't think of a better place for this honor than Richard's life. I would first like to extend the sympathies of the entire Lane Community College family to Richard's family. I realize this must be a very difficult time, but I trust that your knowledge of how much Richard was loved and respected here in the Eugene and Lane Community College family will help in your process. I came to know Richard as we were building this Long Nights. I had seen him running campus and at the powwow, always with his camera, capturing moments of meaning for us to enjoy later. I recall him coming to my office on several occasions, full of passion, enthusiasm, and excitement for his latest idea about how to get this place built. Whether it was the securing of the beautiful trees that became the beams in this building, to preparing them for installation. He gave up his time and his energy and his ideas with unbounded generosity. I remember in particular all the work he put in to take all the leftover wood, split it up, and prepare it to go away to veterans in our community. He exemplified the true meaning of volunteer. He never asked for anything for himself. Rather, he was willing to work on behalf of others. He was a modest man. He didn't care about receiving any credit or recognition for everything he did, but rather went to great pains to honor and give recognition to others. And I will always treasure the plaques that he made out of the remaining wood to honor all the people who had been involved with building the Long Nights. There is no doubt he was a generous, upbeat person who drew others to the causes that he embraced to give of themselves as well. I will be forever grateful that Richard came into the life of Lane Community College and gave tirelessly to help us all. I will miss his smile and his infectious optimism, but I will always remember what he did to make this Long Nights a reality. Thank you, Richard. Welcome home.
Thank you, Mary. Those words did capture a lot of what I think many of us think. She's not the only one whose office Richard visited over the years, I know. Many of you were blessed with his ideas, his dreams. And in this building, many of those dreams have been embodied. One that still hasn't happened, but I'm hoping to keep this dream alive. It's this back wall. You might notice that all the fixtures stick out about 3/4 of an inch. That's because Richard dreamed that this wall, like the walls in the Hall of Honor, will eventually be covered with cedar planks, the way those are. Richard, of course, was the spearheading energy behind not only getting those trees, but getting the planks split out. Many of you were involved in the plank splitting parties that we had both out here and over in the greenhouse. His presence is just so strong in this building and in our lives, and I'm thankful that we're able to remember that presence and continue it. We have several speakers lined up who have been specifically involved in Richard's work here in fairly formal ways. After they've all finished, we hope that those of you who have your own memories to share will come on up and do that. We've got all afternoon, And we look forward to hearing everyone's stories. Many of us were here last month with a similar event. And I left that event after several hours feeling like I knew that person so much bigger than I did from my own knowing. So we're here to share our knowings and our memories of Richard. James Florendo stepped into the job of Native Student Programs Coordinator here at Lane when Frank Merrill retired. And he has worked with Richard in many important ways over the years. He'll speak now. Thanks, James.
He took the wigwam, the language of my people. Good day. This is a day for celebration. It's going to be hard for me. I want people to know that it's going to be hard. And the ways of my people and the ways that we were learning in this long house. This time that I'm having a hard time with right now would go on for a year before I do this celebration. But I understand that we're very fortunate to have family here that I knew nothing about. It's come a long, long ways, son. To come hear about what Jeff talked about. To hear about what his father did. And there are friends here that are coming to support. One of my duties here on this campus is to oversee this building, to be the steward of the Longhouse. What does that mean? In my mind, just taking care of it in many, many different ways. Richard was instrumental. You heard Mary. And you're going to hear a lot of stories about how, in my mind, because I only knew Richard since I've been on this job, probably the last 10 years of his life. Fortunate for me. But I know that last 10 years for him was this building. He put his heart and soul into this building. Yes, he came to my office with his ideas and his energy, and sometimes misinformed. Or with another way of thinking. Because while we're all native, he's Lakota, I'm Wasco. We have another way. We had many discussions about those different ways. But it all came out in the end about really who and what, both his traditions, my traditions, this building, all his efforts to make it happen, who it was for. It was for the future generations. It's for the students that have walked through this building. For the students that have entered Lane Community College and gone on to graduate. He worked with these kids. If I were this building, I would say, thank you, Richard, for giving me the bones to my body. Thank you, Richard, for bringing education to the non-native world. Thank you, Richard, for allowing me to have a place for community. Thank you, Richard, for providing education, of anthropology, of our ways, of the plank splitting, of the flint knapping, of the stories of our history through his friends that he knew in the Forest Service, to give us a more complete history of things like Lewis and Clark, to fill in those gaps that we're not getting in education, in the mainstream education. Thank you to his friends for stepping up and doing that. Thank him for doing this, for making those connections, to the different departments like facilities. Making the connection to those men on a man-to-man level, not an administrative level, to go before them and say, this floor needs to be fixed correct. This isn't hanging right. Why aren't we on schedule? That was your dad. And he'd be in my office going, hey, James, why aren't you making this happen? Why isn't this moving forward? He wouldn't wait for my answer. He'd go talk to his friends in facilities. He'd go talk to his friends in public safety. Where are we going to put these trees? Where are we going to store them? He did a lot of that nuts and bolts hard work. Okay? He had the time. A lot of time. And I am fortunate that I got to know him for those years. And I'm fortunate to see this building do something for him. When I met him, he was a policeman. That's how he came across. There were some things going on campus that they were trying to do for this longhouse, and he was on that like a hawk. I could tell him, hey, you can police this. Have some faith. Have some faith. And as he saw this building go up, there were things he wanted to see happening here. He said, Richard, it will happen. You can't schedule it. You can't put it in a contract. There's an Indian way things happen. They'll just happen. So I knew about your father and me. I was raised a little different. But we were oddly from the same period of time. He was only 5 years older than me. I didn't even know. He was off fighting the war that Creator found a way for me to get out of. And we end up here doing the same thing. Looking to the future, maybe. That's where his heart lied. In the last few years, he spent more time with NASA than any other community member, administrative member, sometimes even me. He helped kids take tours, set up tours in these historical sites for these students to go on. Hope you're going to hear from their mouths. He set up trips across the nation for LCC and this longhouse to stand nationally for what we believe here in the Northwest. We represent him here, even though he's not from here. Although he's from here, the realities of urban native communities. And the reason that this is really so hard for me is because I'm still in shock. I have to be really honest with all. There are still others in the community that I'm still in shock about. This building has been put to use past term for these ceremonies in honor of several of our elders from all communities who have passed. To be honest, I was having a hard time dealing with that. Richard would have been one of those people that would have come in and encouraged me to hang in. That's what he did. For all those dialogues that we had sometimes, I would get a little tense about it. It's hard to balance sometimes a lot of different tribal views, a lot of different cultural views, a lot of opinions about what this building is supposed to be used for, who to take care of. Bottom line, it's everybody. And he would come in and encourage me to stay focused. He was one of the few encouraged me that I was doing the right thing, not questioning what I was doing. And yes, we did have conflicts, but he would come to me face to face and tell me to my face if he felt something I was doing was not right, or we had an issue with it, and we would talk about it. I loved him for that. He was honest, forthright, hard working. I didn't even know he was sick as he was. He held that in. He didn't share that stuff with us. He didn't share much of his personal life with me, except for some of his stories about his time growing up in my time. We found a similarity and a purpose. This is it. There are several in here that took part in making this happen. I just happened to walk into it and told that I was going to be responsible for taking care of it. I don't do it alone. All you all do. When you enter this building, you're out to the spirit of the building. It's a good spirit, a loving and caring spirit. All the ancestors that are represented by the rings of age that encompass these trees, they hear, feel, sense that. It becomes part of them. Just as the power of these trees have come to heal us. It's a healing place at this time. Not only a place to learn, not only a place to rest, eat, but a place to heal from things like this. The last thing I remember about Richard was he was finally feeling comfortable about his nakedness, where it was. Putting it on and wearing it, he was proud. As well he should be. It's still real hard to talk about it in the past. Thank you on behalf of the Longhouse for bringing us together. And sharing in the spirit you allowed me to have. May your spirit linger in here forever. And be shared with all those who walk through these doors. Thank
you. The picture up here is Richard speaking at the grand opening of this longhouse just a few years ago. He worked so hard to get his regalia together before that day. He was determined to wear it, and James noted he wore it very proudly that day. Please come, say hello to Richard, and think of him. His regalia is here. Lots of pictures over here. Many of you are aware of Richard's work as a photographer over the years. He took many of these pictures. They represent not only the construction of the longhouse, the work in the forest, but also the work that he did, as James also mentioned, with the students here. His work with NASA was really, really important, so that he went beyond just this building, but all that this building represents. And this building was originally built for the NASA students, and it's still essentially for the NASA students. Some of them are going to speak in a few minutes about their experience with them, especially the trip to DC that Frank and Richard and several students took. Just want to mention one other thing. James referred to Richard's reticence about sharing his personal life, and I think that's very true. Those of us who worked with him in many ways we did, knew him directly, honestly, straightforwardly, man to man, as he put it, man to woman. His friends were always appreciative of the openness of relationships, but they were usually directed toward the work. I often wanted to go over to Richard's place, look at the things he had stored away, spend more time with him. He invited me several times to go to the sweet home and take a cave tour. Did any of you take the cave tour with him? Remember? Oh, good. And somebody led the cave tour with him. That's one of my great sorrows that I never was able to manage that. A person who's not on the schedule to speak today, I want to give special mention to, because she, more than I think any of us, found a way to spend time with Richard outside of our work on the Longhouse Committee in Lane. Donna Kakey has an administrative position here at Lane and is on the Longhouse Committee, and befriended Richard in ways that many of us never found the time or opportunity or commitment to make. And I want to thank Donna especially for her close friendship to Richard. Say thanks. She and Twyla and Mona and others would have spoken today, but they all said they didn't feel like they could really manage to speak. It is difficult to speak about these things. But they all had very close, appreciative ties with Richard. Nina and Sandon and Morgan were all here at Lane in Richard's heyday and got to go on a trip to D.C. with them. Y'all come on up now, and they're going to share some of their memories about Richard, and I think they're going to focus on that trip to D.C.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Morgan Cahey. I am a graduate here at Lane. He's a good friend of mine. I spent time here in 2002, probably 2005, and I'm in some of these photos here. Yeah, Richard was a great man. He was a very motivated person. Loved everybody around him, shared everything he had with us. Never left anything on the table. Some of you said that he's packed with energy and enthusiasm, and to say the least, he would go the extra mile for people, including myself. I went through some trouble here at Lane, and lost my driver's license to a DUI, and he was right there with me the whole time, holding my hand, picking me up, taking me to school. He had some problems with alcohol too, so he was, he walked that path. So that being said, I owe him a lot. He was a very good person to me, and I have a lot of memories of him. Always smiling, always cracking jokes, always needling you. You never could let your guard down around him, which was kind of nice because he just kept you up. As far as NASA and the DC crew, we're here to represent that right now. Maybe there's others out there in NASA that shared time with him after I left. I don't know how it happened, but Freddie Brown and Richard and maybe a few others really motivated and figured out a way to get us some airplane tickets to get us across the country. How that happened. So that being said, we took a bunch of Sandon and Rowena. We had Connie, Frank, Juan Carlos, Jet, Colette. So, and there may be one or two I'm forgetting, but we had a nice hotel, we had a stipend where we could go eat every day, we had excursions where we would go see all the monuments and museums. Before they even were open to the public, we got to walk through the National Museum of American Indians, and it was just incredible. Nobody had ever seen this art before. There's a little amount of cameras in there, but they allowed us to take some photos, so it was just a special time, and it really we all have people in our lives that kind of mold us to be who we are, and for whatever reason, you kind of veer your path a little bit, and I feel Richard was one of those people for me, and I just want to thank him and his family for being here, always be here. He's probably has more fingers, on a lot of this timber than anybody else, and in my vision, we probably still will be working, and this is Frank's idea, who knows how long ago he envisioned this. And I was fortunate to be the president of the Native American Student Union for a year, and it was just
name's Rowena Jackson, also known as Nina. I met Richard a little before 2003, and I was working on a writing 121 paper. Richard seemed to be one of the people that really stuck out for me. That instant mentor, and so I had several choices to write my paper, and I chose him. So I saved this since 2003, and Sandon's going to help me read a little bit of it, and I'm going to let him read the first part of it. It's 7 pages, so we're just going to pick a few paragraphs out of it. So I turn it over to Sandon.
I'll speak a little bit after this section, but I was reading through it, and since it, it was a little bit of a lengthy thing, but there's one section that really embodies, I think, a lot of what Richard believed in terms of his photography. So this section, looking at, he's an awesome photographer. He talks on how to become a good photographer. Number 1, find your field of interest, where you are best at, have the desire and the will to do it, and a natural born talent. He found that he can do portraits very well. He does wildlife and scenery much better, as you can see, with some of the various photos here. But that is one of the most competitive fields in photography in the world today, because it can be manipulated and messed with. He hopes someday somebody will come up behind him and keep going. If he can influence somebody, yes, he can, and it will help them. He'll give them his little tricks that he's learned on his own. Nobody taught him. He learned most of it as a hobby when he first genuinely got into it about 2 years ago. It was for his recuperation from alcohol. And now that he had found a talent and an eye for it, it's natural. Richard had professionals tell him that he's got talent there and to keep going. Richard will encourage Indian people because he thinks Indian people have more sympathy and togetherness with nature than any other people in the world, but especially here in the United States. He would definitely recommend photography. As far as teaching in the classroom, forget that. This is the part, in terms of where it represents, how he saw it, and I think how his contributions to photography, I think he served his purpose in that regard, and very well. He can remember when he was really tiny, maybe about 8, 9 or 10 years old. His mom and dad had this little brownie box camera, a little square black box he used to play around with every once in a while, and I thought, oh yeah, that'd be fun and everything. Years later, he picked up a camera in Vietnam while he was over there for a short period. He didn't know what happened to the camera, as he had lost the camera somewhere, but it was interesting, fun. He could look back at the pictures and photographs he had sent home. He wasn't sure which ones, and he didn't know, where they were now. But there was something when, he got that camera and he took it, the photos, that he enjoyed it. He liked it, that it preserved things. Photography is a way of preservation, so it's not lost. So I think Richard's work preserved the entire process of this, what it was about. And all the various things we've done. I do have some stuff on the same trips and stuff, but
he gives some words of wisdom to the Native students at Lane Community College. Stay away from alcohol and drugs. Pick your friends very, very carefully. Stay within your own culture if you can. It's good to see other cultures, have experiences with them, and work with them. But the big thing is to stay within your own, because that's where you are safe, and that's where your security is. These are the people who know and care what happens to you, especially the older bunch around here. Guys like me and the other people here are willing to help you and bend over backwards. Richard doesn't think he'll ever be happy with his life. He has an urge within himself to see things he had never seen before in the United States. He is a wanderer. His ex-wife told him once that he was a free spirit and destined to wander. He had realized now. This was 10 years ago when she told me this. I look at it nowadays and yeah, I like to explore. He'd take off on a Sunday at 3 in the morning and go somewhere he'd never been. He'd wander in the hills and get lost on purpose. When Richard's not taking photos or doing anything that has to do with school, he likes watching NASCAR. Sunday morning is his big relaxing day. He is a big-time NASCAR fan and was in football. He also did some quarter-mile drag racing when he was a kid. He had a 1963 Ford 427 dual carburetor and was imaginable in the 60s and it would scream. There was one problem. He/they couldn't keep rear ends underneath it because they would blow the rear ends out of them. He's not a race car driver today. He went a different direction because he didn't have enough talent and money to race. Within 2 or 3 years from now, Richard's #1 thing on his list will to graduate from college. Second is to get his bachelor's degree in photojournalism. Because an independent photojournalist and be responsible for himself. He may be a little self-centered, but he wants to have the freedom to be creative when and where he feels like. He wants to accept the jobs he knows he can do. He doesn't want jobs that somebody hands to him and says, get it done now. That is what he in truth wants to do. Richard also wants to hang his certificate on his wall and say he finished something that he started 20 years ago. He has some very nice powwow photos hanging in the Multicultural Center taken at LCC, U of O, and Oregon State University powwows. He's well known and respected for his photography and his smarty pants. To Richard, everybody is a knothead and admitted he's one too. From the past, present, and future, Richard will always be a decorated, wandering warrior. And I just wanted to add a little bit about my experience too when we went to Washington, D.C. He was a big part of helping fundraise for us. We sold tacos. There were some students who didn't even have any pocket change. So we helped a lot of the students, whether they were Native students or not. We did what we could to help each other to have a good time while we were there. And he had some t-shirts screen printed for us, and I got to design the t-shirt. Sandon saved his. And he also got us matching red hats and had it embroidered NASA on it. And so I really appreciate everything that he's done for us. And I had my personal experiences with Richard too. Not only did he go above and beyond here at the college, but he did it in kind of like an uncle way, a big brother way, father figure. I have so many stories. I was pretty close to him too. So I have 7 pages of this paper, so I only wanted to read a little bit about it. If there's anybody interested, I can make extra copies or send an email because it's pretty good paper. I saw that I had to do some editing, but thanks to him, I got a B in that term, so thank you.
Okay, I just want to talk a little bit about my personal experiences with Richard while here at Lane. I think I first remember coming in, checking out back I think it was the Native American Student Programs Coordinator, and I had been brought into NASA through the Pride fundraiser. And then from there, he just was entering into the group. He was there to be, offer whatever support they needed at any time. There was a term that was a pretty important term for me, and my financial aid had gotten messed up. He had sat there and helped out, helped me get into the school that term, he took NASA, on several trips to the Cascadia Caves at Sweet Home, which is just, it's a little bit of a hike, not too bad, but it's just such a, it's hard to really describe it. I mean, there's pictures probably, but, just, being there and seeing, something so culturally historical, and just like, there's a connection between then and now, that you can feel while there. The biggest trip that we went on though was this fundraiser, like you said, they found the money to get us across the country to the opening of the National Museum of the American Indian. And that was, I grew up in Eugene, so the demographics are pretty tilted in one way. But there, and people from all over North America, like Hawaii down to the tip of South America, up to North Alaska, and all of America. Anywhere you would go with Washington D.C., it would be a majority Native American. Like I even went way across the town on the subway and ended up at some mall, and the food court was so full with Indians. It was just like such a cool experience. Like I'm so lucky to have been part of opening up my that. Coming from a tribe that doesn't currently have a land base, it's just it was just an experience that I'll always treasure. And he's done so much for this building and getting it all built, and for the students within it and the students who will be coming. I just want to say thank you to him.
Wish I could have been on that trip. Everyone has spoken about Richard's commitment to getting things done and his ability to get things done. James suggested that he didn't always do it the paper trail way, the bureaucratic way, which is really interesting considering a big part of Richard's life that we need to also mention. We were hoping to have some members of the military service honor guard here today to be a part of our reminiscing and blessing of Richard. They weren't able to make it, but we need to remember that serving in the military was perhaps one of the most important parts of Richard's life. One of his hopes for this longhouse was that we would have totem poles surrounding the building representing the 6 major divisions of the service. In spite of that experience, which I suppose probably meant working by the book, he came out of that and came here and was determined to work not by the book. And in some cases, things only happened because he was willing to work not by the book. It meant some other people either agreeing when they didn't want to agree or closing their eyes when he knew he was going to go ahead and do it anyway. But luckily, he found a way to work outside those systems. And as much of a headache as it might have been for those who were committed to and tied into those systems, we all appreciate that he found those ways to do those things. Frank Merrill, as you heard, was the Native Student Program Coordinator here when Richard showed up among us. And I've always been curious exactly how Richard came to Eugene. I've asked Richard Jr., and he didn't know. Maybe Frank can tell us. I look forward to hearing what Frank has to say. So, Frank, come on, thanks.
My name is Tim Quitter. I'm from the Kuru tribe in Northern California. Later on, after 2 years after I was born, the United States government gave to me the name Frank Merrill. And so that's what I go by now. I was very fortunate to grow up during a time when we had nothing but living off the land, just like you read in your history book. We didn't have cities. We didn't have hospitals. We didn't have electric lights. We had make do with what the Creator gave us. So we learned a lot of respect for the things around us. For 14 years, me and my family, my son Robbie, my son Billy that's in the back row, Shiloh, Eddie, Harry, he's an Eskimo from Alaska, and all of these students that you heard talk, we become a family out here. And one day, as I was drumming in the cafeteria every Monday night, in the back row, a man stood. He wouldn't come very near the drum for the first few times. He just came every night and he'd stand in the back row. The more I talked about being an Indian and how important it was and how we extend families, and if we didn't extend our families and shared and cared for the things around us, pretty soon this man came forward, got closer and closer to that drum. So one night, we talked him into sitting on that drum. He was a man that was looking for his identity. He knew he was Indian, but he didn't know how to live like one. When I talked about it every night, how we had our potlucks every night, how we shared stories, shared songs, and carried on our tradition like I was brought up, he soon become the person that you hear these people talking about. He understood how important it was to find that identity, and I'm sure glad that I was a big part of that life. Because after I seen Richard become one of my family, he was like a brother to me. He would share things with me. And I remember, I fought with this university for years trying to get this longhouse built. And then one night, they called a board meeting. I brought all my family. The students came. Richard came with his camera. And I got up and spoke. At the end of my speech, I had my little granddaughter that was 6 years old, and my grandson. And some of the younger ones stand up. And I told them, you tell these young ones right here that they cannot have a longhouse on this campus. And that was the turning point for this starting of this longhouse. You heard stories about this committee. I didn't have a committee when I was working on it. I knew what to do, where to go. I gathered up the first $500,000. And pretty soon, the colleague says, what are we going to do with this money? We can't give it back to the tribes because I already went to every tribal person in this Oregon and talked to the tribal leaders and told them how important it was that a longhouse would be built on this campus. The people that stood with me and my family and drummed down in that cafeteria every Monday night understood what I was talking about after we got this building. One day, Richard was gone for about 2 weeks. I didn't see him. And I thought maybe he left. And one day he came into my office. He just got received his full benefit from being a disabled veteran. He had a shiny new white truck. And he said, I got time. I got energy. You tell me what you want, and I'll go get it. And from that day on, me and Richard started putting things together like the things I said when I went there. They always thought I was too much Indian, I guess, because they always had a way of saying, you can't do that, you can't do that. But when it's built exactly like I explained it, it may not have been the way I wanted to build, but it's exactly what we wanted. Richard went to the Forest Service, and I went up and spoke to him. And the next thing I know, me and Richard got in his pickup, and we went up to Sweet Home, way up on the pass, with the Forest Service ranger. And he pointed out some trees. And Richard said, what are we going to do? I said, we're going to fall these trees, we're going to set some chokers, and we're going to pull these logs in. This was a dream of mine, of putting these totem poles around. And so we went out, cut down them trees, got a logging truck up there, and we set the chokers, me and Richard, and we pulled them logs up on the road and brought them down here, and we had a carver carving them totem pole down here in the courtyard. Everything was going really good until one day something happened, and it's not for me to talk about it, but it was stopped. But we continued to have this dream of this longhouse. We traveled all over this city, and up McKenzie River, up Blue River, Oak Ridge. I talked to every carver, and my dream was to have these logs that's outside of this entranceway carved into eagles, bears, things that represent the ones that walk before us. I wanted this longhouse to be as natural as it could be. So Richard took the time and the energy that he had and made sure every time I wanted something done, he made sure it got done. They split the logs, the cedar logs, with wooden pallets and wedges by hand, because we wanted this as natural and as spiritual as we could. He understood if we used that cedar, the cedar was what heals us people. It was given to us for that reason. He understood from the story they told how the cedar heals and takes care of us. So they wanted to do it as natural as possible. And these logs that you see came from the Coquille tribe. These are the one-legged ones that overlook a lot of things. And so these are the ones that we put up here so we can overlook the things around us and keep us in good spirit. Everything you see here, and I thank that committee, Twyla and Donna and Barbara Delansky. She had a big part in it because she was my boss at that time. She took a lot of guff from this college because I had a lot of things I wanted to change. When you're an Indian person, you know what it is to be who you are and where you want to go. One day, Richard came to me with that brand new pickup, and he said, I want a feather to hang in my pickup. So he brought me a feather, and I said, no, you cannot have a feather like this hanging in your pickup. At that time, my son Billy was standing in the back row, was working on his bustle and his shield. He took one of the feathers off his shield, and he gave it to Richard. When I climbed in that pickup, I was expecting to see that feather hanging from his windshield. And I said, where's that feather we gave you? He said, look around. And he had it in the back seat. And I said, the feather should be hanging in front. It's for your protection and your guidance. It'll keep you safe wherever you go. And he says, well, I don't have an Indian card yet, I'll get picked up. So we went and got his card. And that was and he wanted to share and give back to the community what he had gained in that respect. It's a very much honor to see the people here, and each and every one of you probably have your own stories that you could be climbing up here talking in your own way that he touched each and every one of you. I know my students, as we stood out there every morning at 8 o'clock in the morning cooking fried bread all day long. They made 2 trips to the Gathering of the Nations, and Richard went along at this happened one. So this what kept students in school. This gave this college a name, and this name carries on yet throughout any place you go. The t-shirts that they wear. You look on TV sometimes at some of the old pictures of Gathering of the Nation. I was sitting there watching them as the dancers were coming down the walkway going into the dance arena, and I see an LCC shirt standing there in the middle of the crowd. These are the things that I'm proud of as I work here at this college. That jacket in the back that's hanging on there, when Richard graduated, that was his graduation present for me and the rest of the students that graduated that year. The first students I had 3. We cooked fried bread and sat out here in the courtyard, and I gave them a t-shirt. And later on, I started making jackets because I figured it's a lot better having a jacket or a t-shirt than a built-in blanket. Because if you had a built-in blanket, you'd be home and nobody would be able to see it. They need to be proud that they came here to this college and received the support and the energy that they got. So I want to thank LCC for allowing me to speak today for a man that was part of my family. And this is what we need to do as Indian people. Extend your families, because you cannot make it alone in this world. Ask each and every one of these students, and they will tell you how great it was when they walked on this campus. How great it was when we picked out different spots. When I picked out this spot, it was a big rock that sat right here where this honor room's at, and it sat up in the air. We brought the drum out here, and my son, my grandkids, and the students that came out with me. And we drummed, and the red-tailed hawk sat on that rock all of the time that we were drumming. And this is one of the things that I'd like to thank Richard for. He loved to take pictures. I got probably 10 albums full of dances of the powwows that we put on here at LCC that he made up for me. He also made up pictures of my kids and my grandkids dancing on the dance floor. Every Christmas for 10 years, he brought me over a ham to thank me for the things that I gave him. To allow him to be part of my family. To show him the respect that each and every one of us carry and how to use it in a good way. I cannot speak enough of my family for being part of this too. And the ones that sit here that know us. I know that this is a time that we say goodbye to a man and carry on a tradition. And I know that this man was proud to say he was an Indian. So at this time, I'd like to give this eagle feather back that Richard brought to me, and he was going to hang in his truck, to his son, because now you are the warrior, you are the head of the household, you carry on that tradition that your dad was so proud of. Look at the things that he looked up to and carried in your heart back to your homeland where you're staying. And understand that everything that these people will say about your dad was in respect and honor the service that he was in, supporting us so that we could carry on these ceremonies, because if it wasn't for us veterans, we would not be here today. We may not be able to carry on the tradition the way that we see it. So be respectful and gratitude, and always have in your heart a special place for your dad.
That's the highest one, and that's one in the Indians to give the another. That respect.
Thank you, Frank. I look forward to hearing some of those stories. I knew a lot about Frank's relationship with Richard. I knew they were like brothers. Richard made it fairly easy to feel like a brother with him, but his relationship with Frank was special. I mentioned Richard's determination to work through bureaucracies. Frank was in a pretty interesting position because he was part of the bureaucracy, but he was constantly committed to work around the bureaucracy. And again, we benefited from that commitment in many ways. I do remember when Frank was dreaming of a longhouse, was committed to having a longhouse at Lane, and finally he said, okay, I'm going to go out there and decide where it's going to be and tell them where it's going to be, and then see what they do. So we're very thankful for what he did that day, and for welcoming Richard into his family, because I think it's through that family that he became part of our family, all of us here. And a special part of his relationship was with the outdoors, not only with his nature photography and his trip to the Cascadia Cave, but he made some really good friends up in the Sweet Home Ranger District. Please, before everybody leaves today, number one, stick around for the food and the gathering and the meeting other people. Come look at all these pictures. They'll show you a lot of what Richard's life was about and his various commitments. But Tony and Cindy are here today from the Sweet Home Ranger District, and we appreciate their willingness to help us create this space, their willingness to be friends, brother, sister to Richard, and their willingness to come down today to help us celebrate his life.
An honor for the Forest Service to be here and to have been such a big part of LCC's work in creating this wonderful longhouse. Honored to meet Richard's son. Thank you. My name is Cindy Glick. I'm the district ranger at Sweet Home. I'd like to introduce my boss. She was the forest supervisor for the Willamette National Forest, and my co-worker, Tony Farquet, who really was the key link for bringing Richard into the Forest Service. I I'm not going to talk very long. I'm going to let Tony speak a lot. And then we have a gift that we'd like to give that Meg will present at the end. I just want you to know that Richard's energy, his continual commitment to being around our ranger district and out in the forest was incredible. He was one of our most loved volunteers. He not only helped to create this beautiful space we're in, he also helped us as bureaucrats, Forest Service employees, learn how to work with the tribal cultures. We put together the PowerPoint with many pictures that Richard took, and very few did we have of Richard himself, because he was always out there helping, and we had very few pictures of him. But when we do leave this gathering, we would like you, his son, to take home one of these posters that we put together, and we'll also leave one for LCC. But his presence, his care, his tending of not only the land and LCC, but also of all of us, we really did feel we were a part of Richard's family. He will long be remembered and cherished with all the wonderful photographs and memories that are with us forever.
Tony Farkey, archaeologist, Sweet Home District. We didn't know him as Richard, we knew him as painted horse. He'd come up for our presentations, we introduced him as, I'm painted horse, so go to Sioux. Just like that. Great project. And that was a good thing. We talked a lot through 10 years of stomping around the woods, and Darren and Don and people who were in the Forest Service and our bosses, trying to find the right seer, how to get it out. And it's true, Jeff. We like to get outside the boundaries of the norms. And the Forest Service, we have a lot of layers. You know, when we do cut rid of the slate flies. And he helped us to cut it for us. It was very good. It was very fine. I'd say I called on, we talked 2 or 3 times a week on the phone. We couldn't come up and see us. Towards the last few years, it wasn't quite as able to drive as it used to be. I'd say, painted horse, what's going on out there? I'd say, running monkey? You don't know. That's how our little banter back and forth. He was proud to be a Sioux, that's for sure, no doubt about that. We painted the PowerPoint, we have some of the sheriff's trainees were involved in it. He became part of what we did. It wasn't just about taking people and teaching native paths over great cultural landscape management in that country. But he was part of honoring the elders. He was always working with veterans. We had our CCC picnics, and the old guys in their 90s would show up, he'd be there and help honor them. It was great. We were happy. We had probably several thousand images that he took in 10 years he was documenting our work. I think we need to thank Karen Rayson, who's here today. She's an incredible with us. And my boss, Jeremy Marshall, who's in Arizona now. For the images we do have of Richard are our painted works. It's known to all of us. And it's a good thing to remember. He was always a gentleman. I've heard a lot of people say that. We spent a lot of time together. He's always a gentleman. When he'd take pictures, we'd be going into Cascade Cave. It's an 11,000-year-old rock art site with shamanic symbolism. We'd take all kinds of groups of people in there. There's a couple of spots we lined groups up to take pictures. And every time we line people up, a lot of people take time to take shots. It can be very quick. 2 or 3 quick shots. it's like I'm taking a shot at Frank. Frank, to be at the same podium with you was such an honor. It's just outstanding. Thank you so much for your support. But Painted Horse, he'd take 2 or 3 great shots. He'd always look in the viewfinder, his big like digital camera, and say, "I'm happy." He'd always say that, "I'm happy." Those words ring. He was a happy guy. He could smell BS when he walked in the room. So you didn't push stuff around Painted Horse. We had some people come to the Forest Service meetings sometimes and trying to run something by us, and he always smelled it. We right at the range and said, "Don't trust him." He's good at that. I'm terrible. Painted Horse could smell BS when he walked in the room. We all know that. Frank mentioned Lewis and Clark. And we decided as conservation education strategy 15 years ago that we could probably start telling some of the story of Oregon history through the eyes of Lewis and Clark. And there's a lot of perspective on that story. It's a great American journey, you know, and it's not all about science and conquest. But if you learn to tell the story of this 8,000-mile, 28-month campaign through the eyes of the tribes, you can convey a lot of different perspectives and messages. Richard definitely, Painted Horse was always there, pushing us a little bit forward on that line. So we decided, 100 years ago, we'd take a week-long heritage expedition. We took 12 members of the public on a 5-day, 1,200-mile tour of Lewis and Clark on the Columbia River. Nobody's been doing that out here in West Solution. And there weren't any rules to do it. Painted Horse told me, "Mike, just do it. Just do it." And we did it. We broke all the rules. Anita was there. Karen Reed's song was there somewhere with us. There she is back there. And Painted Horse and 4 of us took 12 people on the tour. And we just had a credit card. We had a borrowed bus. We were putting government credit card diesel into a school district vehicle, and we broke all the rules. We got back, and they said, "Tony, you could be fired." And Donna said, "That was the right thing to do." Painted Horse stood right by. I said, "Of course it's the right thing to do. We need to do it." So we put on many Lewis and Clark talks, and we was there to take a lot of photographs. I teach at LBCC because that's something we didn't have quite often. We love Lewis and Clark lectures. And I said, "Well, Painted Horse, are you?" He always said I was Lewis. He not annoyed me greatly. He knew that. He said, "You must be Lewis." I said, "What does that mean? Does that make you Clark?" Not really. And he said, "No. Don't you know who I am? I'm Black Buffalo, who was the chief of the Lewis and Clark tour. The Teton Sioux looked that up. A lot of Black Buffalo's traits were embodied in the man that Painted Horse became through your coaching. Black Buffalo was the man who stood up to the United States of America for honoring his people. And we wanted Lewis and Clark and all the traders to stop and pay the tribute that was due to those folks. It was quite a story. Look that up. Cascade gave us a reference. We take a lot of tours in there. He became a real fan taking tours in there. And when he was able to walk in with us, he never missed a day. I make sure I told him whenever we had tours. I take probably 30 tours a year in there. Split up between kids and adults. And then do all the time. Don Day, the great Don Day, who did all the hand splitting and all the things like that. All the cedar top division way to work with wood. He set up all of his flip mapping tools and all of his artifacts. Richard would be there, we'd introduce him and say, "This is Painted Horse. I'm Painted Horse, the Dakota Sioux." And he always unrolled plans for this building. And he would talk about it. He educated dozens of groups of people, 30 to 35 people per group, about what this building was to become. He talked with such great pride about it. A site like that needs a lot of tending. It's really old, and people tend to misbehave sometimes. And it broke our heart several times when the site's been vandalized. One time people had gone in there with charcoal and highlighted all the rock art petroglyphs that are there. I think they do it for better contrast or so you get better pictures. But it is not respectful to people. And Painted Horse and I were lucky enough to wash the walls clean several times. And that's something that I'll never forget. Got the honor to go in there and wash. The shamanic symbolism of 11,000-year-old site clean. And restored. I was very proud. He was a good man. For stepping up when we needed to get help. He had several dreams which we were unable to fulfill. He really wanted to have the Wounded Warrior Project become a Forest Service annual event. We would work with the wounded veterans who came back and set up different activities to help train them and become more employable. We're working on that, but we never quite put that together. He was very proud in his research to identify his ancestry to include Sitting Bull. He's probably related to that book. And we looked into Sitting Bull's lineage. And of course, you know Sitting Bull was known as a great prophet. He was a leader, he was a chief. Not so much a warrior, but he could fight. He directed the battles. But he's best known in the Teton Sioux lineage as a horse breeder. And we found quite an interesting story. When the Theodore Roosevelt National Park was established in the 1920s, inadvertently they captured one of Sitting Bull's herds of horses. They're blue roans. They're called the Nakota horse, Nakota horse. There are 300 in that national park. There's a group of folks who have taken some of those horses and bred them, and they're available for descendants of ancestral Sioux lineage. And we were planning this summer, we planned for 2 years. I could take my 95-year-old uncle to see bringing wood with the feathers. We're going to go back and try to get a couple of those Nakota horses and bring them back. Richard wanted to sell his house on the hill, give it a place on a couple of those horses. It would have been good. All right, I got a couple of quick things here before I turn it over to Nate. All right, this is some things I learned about your dad. Computer imagery, great. Changing the digital clock in the truck, couldn't do it. I would do that for you. Independent, yes. Major Democratic and Republican parties, outside the lines completely. Hi. Hey. BLTs, Don Day and I have BLTs in the zone where we together. BLTs. Coconut. Chevy. Ford. NASCAR. He taught me to speed NASCAR. Can you believe that? I never thought in my life I would do that. NASCAR. Basketball. 49ers. Raiders. Cal. Stanford. Beavers. Ducks. Buffalo. Salmon. You're in his vehicle, and the term music on it was always 60s rock and roll. Always 60s rock and roll. Disco. Cedar. Obsidian. This longhouse. Don Day. Thank you. And history good. He was proud of the things he'd done, and we're proud of him. Many will start Mitchell.
Sure. My name is Nick, and there are about a dozen Forest Service people here today because Painted Horse was part of our family, and particularly called home to the City Hall District. And every family has a storyteller, and you just met ours. Thank you, Tony. Painted Horse, it's been spent a lot of time in this office, he spent some time in mine. He was one of the first people to greet me. When I arrived here about 5.5 years ago, as forest supervisor of the Land National Forest. We helped supply a lot of the cedars that graces the facility, and we're proud to do so. He had that infectious vision, and I resonate with people that have infectious vision. So I was an easy mark for him. As he told us about this building that he wanted to create, and we very much wanted to be part of it. And we're very honored to do that, because the public lands are your lands, and they were well cared for by Native people long before we all arrived here, and long before the Forest Service was created. So we have always seen that as giving back. I really can't think of a better structure as a legacy to Richard. The things that he believed in terms of always learning something new, always experimenting. I think it's just wonderful that there will always be students who will come through here. I think that's just amazing. And Dante, you are part of our family too. My heart goes out to you today. I think it's part of the job of people who can speak to speak for people who cannot speak. And there's a way in which every grief reminds us of every other grief of our lives. I think that's just the way it's supposed to be for human beings that walk this planet. Is to remember all the people that came before. Rest easy, Richard. We would like to give something to this longhouse in memory of Richard. We're all standing too still, the lights have gone out. We have a plaque here with a well painted by Dante. It says, on our painted horse, has Richard's name here, a dedicated volunteer of the Willamette National Forest, Sweet Home Ranger District. His service as a photographer, historian, and cultural interpreter were among the many talents he shared with us. So we would like to present this to LCC.
James, would you come up here?
So that it may hang in here and have Richard's name for everyone to see, for all the generations that will pass through this building and take advantage of the legacy that he was so inspired to give us. Thank you very much.
Thank you on behalf of Lake Community College, the Longhouse, Native Community. It's beautiful. Thank you, Don. You just probably truck with that rope. Sitting back there. Don was, here's them coming up with this a lot. Because he and Richard were, when all the cedar plank splitting was going on, when class about Lewis and Clark was going on, when flint napping was going on, Don Day was the expert. He was the one that showed us how to do what needed to be done. Richard had the ideas. There are a lot of people that talked about contributing. Don was one of the few people that stepped up and showed us how to do the work. Splitting planks with mallets and wooden wedges was not an easy thing to do. It took a lot of sessions, and there weren't a whole lot of people at those sessions. I remember, because they were here for a teaching moment. It was part of the teaching moment that all these gentlemen, Tony, Don, that Richard and Frank. Okay? That's what this building's for. That's why it was built. Share and teach all of us. You know, like I said, I've just been fortunate enough to be the one to take the awards on behalf of the Longhouse and LCC. You know. Still has to go through the administrative processes. But it's been suggested that possibly the conference room could be renamed after or for Richard. And I was reminded that in the Longhouse tradition, we really don't do those kinds of things. You don't recognize any singular person or something. But I don't see why not in this Longhouse where we have television and computers and cameras and electric lights and more stuff that doesn't really belong in a traditional Longhouse. I know, I was raised in it. That's what I was saying about the difficulties of merging cultures and honoring all people and all cultures. But that's what this Longhouse is about. It's in an educational setting. It's on a community college campus. Native people got together. A lot of people supported those Native people to teach everybody what Native people have, what we have to offer society, the lessons that lie within our culture that are really vital nowadays to the entire planet. They're very simple lessons. It's like, I'm going to say it, and it'll come out right. Frank, I know Frank. We went to school together for a long time. Richard, myself, we're simple men. You heard Frank talk about being brought up in a place where there was no electricity. I was lucky we had electricity. I didn't have TV by the time I was 12. But I was raised on a reservation here in Oregon. And, these men embody a lot of the hard work it takes to educate people about Native folk. And that work's going to continue in the building that both of them have worked all their lives to provide for all of you and all of us. I need to be included in that. This is our Longhouse. Thank all of you for contributing. Thank Richard for all his hard work to make this happen. We really need to understand that. His life and soul tremendous. I know it. It's all we were taught to me. It's all we've ever worked about. It's what we come into my office about. And he was in my office quite often. I stopped and think about it over the last 5 years. He was one of my most frequent visitors. Of all the people on the Longhouse community, of all the faculty, of all the administrators, of all my colleagues, he was the one that was consistent. That's why I appreciated him. And I appreciated the simplicity of life, the way he looked at things, because that's how Indians look at things. You don't talk, you do. Richard was a do. Thank you.
More applause to the Forest Service for all their support and convenience. For sharing those words and for being, through Richard, part of our family here. It's nice to see how big our family is in so many ways and how much Richard had to do with expanding our understanding of the world and enlarging our families. As has been made very clear, photography was a huge part of Richard's life. John Myers is a photographer friend of Richard's. I assume John has taken some of these pictures. I know that Richard worked together a lot, in the photography world, and he's going to speak to us today now about that part of Richard's life. Thanks, John.
I met Richard here at LCC in, I believe it was 2002. We took a art class together. And at the same time, I was working at a camera shop down on campus, called Burlocks. It's no longer there anymore. And Richard would wander into the camera store on a very regular basis, probably 2 times a week or more, became more frequent. We would just talk photography, and we would share stories about working in camera shop down in the Bay Area. And years went by, and I opened my own studio, and the overwhelming theme I've gotten out of today is that Richard would like to come into our offices and say hello to us. And I would say that at least once a week, Richard would come to our studio and say hello. And we talked about photography, but one of the things Richard just became a really good friend. I was in my early 20s and struggling with running a business and figuring out the next steps in my life and directions that I wanted to go. We would just talk, and we would go and have lunch together, and he was good at distracting me and saying, come on, get out of here, let's go do something else. And so I've known Richard for about 12 years, and he's just a good friend. And I think a lot of people today really sum up a lot what he was like. He was just a wonderful man, he was giving, caring, supportive. He talked to me here off about the Longhouse. I feel like I know so many people here through the stories that he would share with me, and I was just never able to put faces to those names, but that would be good. It's better than things to do that today. I feel like I learned a lot about him today just by listening, and that's really it's a good thing. Yeah, he was a big man. He's going to be missed. He made a lot of things happen, and we're lucky to have met his son and we can share some time together, which I really appreciate very much. And yeah, I think we'll leave it in a short speed there. He was a good person. He's getting missed. He is missed.
Other than Richard Jr., I think Michael Husser might have known Richard longer than anybody else here. Michael went to high school with Richard in Richmond, California. And after they graduated, Michael moved in to Richard's family's home. I mentioned how Richard made people brothers. Here's a real brother to Richard. Michael has been a musician for much of his life. He's played bass on sessions with Buffy St. Marie and various other people. And he's prepared a song that we're going to listen to. Shall we have the song first and then sing?
Well, when you get through it, then you can play the song.
Great. Michael's going to come up and sing, and I really look forward to hearing a song that he recorded called Somebody's Son. Michael Husser.
You can hear me without that PA?
Yeah.
You hear me? Raise your hand in the back. You can hear me? Good, that's good. They always raise their right hand. You ever notice that? It's like everybody's being sworn in. I don't know what it is. My name's Mike. I'm an alcoholic. Hi. See, everybody says hi, Mike. My response is, sorry, wrong meeting. I met Richard in 1959. How many people were around in 1959? Fewer names. Okay, anyway. So I went to high school with Richard. We started at Salesian High School in 1959. We graduated in 1964, first graduating class 50 years ago, as long as the math holds out. So I went to the reunion. Richard couldn't go. Everybody missed him. I went there. A bunch of old people showed up. You know, and they said, well, how come you're so spry? That's a good word, spry. Get over it. And I said, well, because I play music. And I was a musician when I was at Salesian High School. We had a folk group and we sang folk songs. And after I graduated from high school, I wanted to be able to go out with girls, so I figured if I stayed being a musician, it would work. And so Richard said, you know, you do pretty well, why don't you practice? I said, okay. So I ended up moving in with Richard's family. They took me in after I graduated from high school. I had issues in my own family, so they took me in. And his mother was a registered nurse who worked with my father, who was a pediatrician, and worked with my dad. And I lived with the family, and she just said, well, you're our son. You're Richard's brother. That's just what it is. You're Richard's brother. And so I accepted that, and I was privileged to be in their home. And I lived with them. And they were quiet and they were strong. And they took care of their children. And they took care of their day. And after I lived with them, I ended up living with another native family from Acoma Pueblo, New Mexico, which is in 60 miles from Albuquerque. And it's called Sky City. It's a 1,000-year-old city on top of a mesa. It's the oldest continuously inhabited city in North America. And I lived with the people from there. And I was living with them, and I got a phone call, and I was working in a shoe store, and they said, we need, when I first met them, they said, we need a bass player tonight to play at the center. And I had no idea, center play. And they said, we'll pick you up. And I said, I've only had a bass for 3 weeks. And they said, that's okay, we don't get paid unless there's a bass player. I said, okay, I'll take it. So they picked me up. We went to the American Indian Center in San Francisco, and there's 400 Native people and me. I had a good time. I was playing the bass. It was called playing Follow the Gods. I don't know if anybody plays bass, but it was like this. And Larry Sanchez and I hit it off. Larry Sanchez was the son of the singer for the Acoma Pueblo tribe, Warren Sanchez. And I ended up living with their family and playing at the American Indian Center. And that's where I met Jay Silverheels. You remember Jay Silverheels? And he was about this high. He has a voice you would not believe. But I met him, and I was around Native people for years. And then I went out and started playing music. And I ended up playing with Buffy St. Louis. Anybody know who that is? Okay, she plays guitar. And she writes songs. And she was with our group, and she said, what do you know about Native people? And I said, well, I live at Acoma. Okay, you're fine. So I did an album with her, which was a privilege. And Richard, meantime, is off defending us. He's in Vietnam. He's in Vietnam. He comes back. He doesn't say anything about it. He gets in police. He ends up at San Quentin Prison. Did you know that? He worked at San Quentin Prison. And that's a bad place to be. If you're a guard, if you're a prisoner, it's a bad place to be. He worked there. Never said a word about it. Anyway, he got a disability because of working at San Quentin Prison. Things like that can happen. I was in Richmond, California, and I contacted Richard, and he says, I'm living in Eugene, you got to come to Oregon. And I said, okay. I had come to see another friend of mine. I moved up to a place called Scotts Mills, which is outside of Silverton. And I was living in Scotts Mills. I'd come from the Bay Area in Los Angeles and San Francisco and everything. And my partner was from Manhattan, New York, which there's a few people there. And we ended up in Scotts Mills. And we got there, and there was no frequencies in the air. It was quiet. You could hear what you were creating. And we contacted Richard, and we said, Richard, we're playing at the Marion County Fair. Would you like to come up? And he said, yes. And he came up and he took wonderful photographs of us on stage. He came up twice. We played at the Oregon State Fair, we played Marion County Fair. And I said, Richard, what do you want us to do? He says, don't you worry about that. I'll take care of it. And I said, okay. And he always had this wry sense of humor all the time. You know, I said, Richard, what do you want me to do? He says, you just do it, I'll handle my end of it. I said, okay, Richard, fine. And we were always that way. He called me knucklehead, called me a knothead. How many people got called a knothead? It's a privilege to be called a knothead, Richard call you a knothead. And he was one of the most centered people that I've known. And I've met a lot of people, we've all met a lot of people, but Richard was centered. He kind of knew where he was going, knew what he was doing, knew what he wanted to do. And he brought my partner and I here and showed us his longhouse and gave us a tour. And he said, these logs we brought in, the whole thing, these are big logs. Anybody, these are big logs. And he made sure all these logs, he and Frank made sure all these logs came in. It's amazing stuff that he did. And he was humble about it because he was in service. He was in service to everybody here, everybody to come here, everybody who has been here. That's what Richard did. That's what he was about. And he was my brother, and it was a privilege and an honor to know him. And he made me a better person. He's made other people better people. And he came into his contact with his heritage through his mentor. He did it. It was a wonderful, beautiful thing. It's when your heart opens and you attach yourself to that which you have always been, and that's what you will always be, is what Richard did. And that's what he manifested in his photography, unconsciously. People would go in and take a million pictures of Richard on it. Here it is. Right? That's what he did. That's what he did with the eye. You see, he had the eye. And he had a heart. And if you have the heart and the eye, you can do it. I used to judge the Emmy Awards for camera and for video editing when I worked at NBC Network. And I worked for them, for years. And I'm retired, and they still pay me, which is cool. I did the Gong Show, so they got to pay me. Anyway, so I love Richard. And every time my partner Stephanie and I would drive down the road, you see a hawk, and she goes, "Oh, there's Richard. He's flying. He's in the tree. He's looking at us. He's looking over us, taking care of us." And it will always be that way. He will always be that way. He will be here with us. I speak here without the PA because this room is built for people to speak and shit. That's why I did that. And so I just want to tell you that Richard, my brother, he will always be in my heart. He's a part of me, he's part of all of us. And we have a song that we wrote that we believe will manifest our feelings toward Richard and about Richard. And it's called Somebody's Son. And we wrote it, and we hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Technical difficulties, hold on just a moment.
In a neighborhood where everybody knows everybody else's name, and in that house there is a garden where the old folks testify that he's on his way. And there are children, and there are puppies too. And there's
That's a good song too, don't worry. Man uses tools, sparkful.
Phoenix down here. There's enough out there. Find what you need. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. James mentioned the work that many of us participated in physically, and I was just reminded how on those days that many of us gathered to do some of this work, Don Day would show us how to do it. Richard would put the tools in our hands and say, now do it. He always had the tools, but he also did it too. It was amazing how much energy and activity he could do. A couple of people have mentioned his humility, and I keep going back to that. An incredibly humble man. In spite of all you've heard he did, he never took credit. He volunteered, and as Michael mentioned, he served. He lived for this service. Thanks so much to those who have spoken so far. I hope, we all hope, that others of you have words that you'd like to share with us, memories that you'd like to share to help us all more fully enlarge our picture of Richard. So I'm just going to sit down, and whoever would like to come up next, please come on up. Sometimes it takes a while for you to get it together to stand up and walk up here. I've been at these things where we waited a few minutes, and then someone got up and stopped it, and the person who was about to speak then sat back down. So even if it takes a little while for you to get it together to come on up, please do that now.
At least I just do this now, but I might back out. First of all, I'm an employee of Lane Community College. I have been here for 15 years. I didn't know Richard a long time, but I came to this building and powwows with Frank and other powwows in the area. I have picked a poem that I want to read about Richard that is a side of him that I have thought of him and connected. But I also want to tell you a story of where I have found this poem. This book in the front says its copyright is 1967. I have one child, a son that was born in 1966. So looking at my son, I know that was a long time ago. The book I took from my parents' home. I lived in Washington. I came to Oregon in 1959. My dad had passed away. He was a member of the Quinault Nation of Washington. And it was always kind of amusing to our family sometimes that his grandfather, my great-grandfather, was 100% Italian. So he always enjoyed that. My dad's brother is still living today. He is the elder member of the Quinault Nation. Last month, we celebrated his 101 birthday. You can't even imagine what an honor it is to be in this man's presence, because he's part of my dad. After my dad's passing, my mother, probably at the age of 85, maybe 86, was going to leave our family home. We all went home. There's 6 of us children. I saw this book on a shelf behind my mother's recliner. I picked it up. I didn't even read it. I just kind of flipped it open. And I said, "Mom, can I have that book?" She said, "Oh, of course." she grinned really big, and she said, "Yes, Marie, do that for me." And she said, "If you want to tell your brothers and sisters, you can do that too, but you don't have to unless you want to." Well, I didn't tell my brothers and sisters because I wanted to do this as a gift to them and our complete family. It took everything I had to stand there and read that poem. So this book is a pure treasure to me. In the last couple of days, I have sat down and I knew there must be a poem in here that fits Richard. I found that poem. And the poem is about friendship. We've all been talking about our friendship and what he meant to us. So I would like to read this poem to you. And please excuse me if I stumble, because I'm a little bit like James. I find this really difficult because he made me feel very special and that I was his true friend. He did that to all of us. I only wish I had met him longer ago, but I treasure the part that I had of him. So I will read this poem that this book means very much to me. The poem is called "The Golden Chain of Friendship." Friendship is a golden chain. The links are friends so dear, and like a rare and precious jewel, is treasured more each year. It's clasped together firmly with a love that's deep and true. And it's rich with happy memories and fond recollections too. Time can't destroy its beauty, for as long as memories lives, years can't erase the pleasure that the joy of friendship gives. For friendship is a priceless gift that can't be bought or sold. But to have an understanding friend is worth far more than gold. And the golden chain of friendship is a strong and blessed tie, binding kindred hearts together as the years go passing by. And Richard, where are you? Over here. Thank you for adding me to your link of chain of gold. And I'm sure many of you sitting here feel that you're also that same link with him. He'll never be forgotten. And thank you for being here today, for honoring your father. What a special person. You were blessed. Thank you.
Richard had heartbeat that beat hard and strong. For this longhouse, which he loved, for Lane Community College, which he loved, and for the NASA students, which he loved. This longhouse has been great. We've housed many things in here, from honor givers to classes, even volunteer classes of dancing and drumming, and a whole array of stuff. Well, Richard was here for almost every one of them, taking pictures, which he loved. And I got to work with Andre and Richard in building this longhouse, debarking the cedars, and they gave me a branch, and they take your pick between a bone or a wedge of wood to make planks.
I'm a 5-year NASA student. I'm on 1 year trying to raise money to finish my last year. I need 1 more year to finish my 3rd associate's in culinary arts. So Richard was here for everything. We did, and still do, craft nights here, and Cherokee meetings on the weekends, and many activities. His Longhouse is a place of peace for the students, beyond just classes and potlatches, community and family. This was our home, and I am glad that we'll be coming back and get to experience that all again. And when I worked with Dawn and Richard, it was like gaining a family. It wasn't just me because I was going through a divorce, but it was me looking at people that accepted me for who I was, didn't ask questions, and I was just one of them. And that's what this Longhouse represents to the students. And we have very much respect for this place and honor for the people that take care of it. And we are glad that we had it during the time we were here. And we were hoping for more things to happen in this place. And some things have been on hold, but we know that they'll get done. I don't think it's very odd that it started raining as soon as we started this celebration of life. If you noticed, it started raining really hard, and then the sun broke out. I think Richard is trying to tell us, let that rain wash away your grief and your tears. Know me for who I am, the loving, kind, happy person, and let that sunshine fill you now as we keep walking on the road. Richard smiled all the time, was happy all the time, would help anybody with anything, and he's just a great man. And I know that even though he's not with me anymore on this earth, he'll always be in my heart. I will honor him for the man that he is. And today, the NASA students and alumni have made an honor basket to pass on to his son in our honor and respect for him. So we give you our condolences. Just keep a smile and know how many lives he has touched. Thank you.
My name's Darren Utley. I was a timber sale administrator on the Sweet Home District for a long time. I'm now retired. Richard, it fell to me when Richard first came to the district asking for, at first he just actually wanted pieces of steel for carving and the like, and then I had some sales going that had a lot of cedar chunks and hunks and pieces in it, and I took him up and showed it to him. Yep, that's just what I'm looking for, and so it was just slash, so we had a system that we could give him a permit to just take it and use it. So some time went by, and he also learned that we had provided, that the district, the forest had provided wood for grand ronds and sillettes, and not just hunks and pieces, but truckloads of logs, mostly cedar. So I got a call one day, and it was Richard, and he says, "Oh, I need a load," and I said, well, knock yourself out, you can have all. He says, "No, I want to load a log." Well, for what? He was planning this longhouse. So that launched, I don't know how many years, how many loads of logs and stuff, but I lost track. But Richard was a force of nature. He didn't always understand the hoops that I had to jump through in order to make that load of logs happen. But it helped. I learned working with Don Day and others. I traveled, in my work, I was out on the ground a lot, and I worked on different districts. And anyway, I started keeping track of logs and snags and blowdown and stuff. I'd drive along and I'd see something and, well, that could be an Indian log. So I just kind of kept that. So when Richard came along, I had some stuff in the bank, and we would go out and he'd look at it and decide whether it was right or not. And so that started it. And I hooked him up with Gary Olson, the blue truck, the self-loading truck. And funny story, I had to, before he could ship those logs down the state highway, there had to be a tag and the logs had to be branded. And so I would meet them usually up there after, I try to find out, well, when are you going to be ready to move? And so he'd give me a time. So anyway, this one day I was on my way back into the district, and I had to whip up it was that old 7-sheet sale. Whipped up there, and here the truck was. They just got the last logs on, and Richard was talking to Gary, and so I pulled up there, and Richard's new white truck was parked there, and so I got the load tagged and branded, and Gary took off, headed this way with the load. Richard was standing around there, and he was kind of looking a little sheepish, and I said, "What's the matter?" And he says, "Do you have a cell phone?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, I locked myself out of my truck." I said, "Well, Richard, my cell phone ain't going to help you open the door on your truck." "Yes, it will. Yes, it will." I said, "Well, how?" And he said, "All I got to do is get a call out. I can call this number." And he had one of the first trucks that had OnStar. And so, long story short, they opened his truck door for the saddle. Richard didn't really want me, now, it's a good thing, well, he's probably here, but he didn't really want me to tell that. But I know Richard and I can communicate on a level. We're both veterans, and we talked about stuff. And anyway, I really enjoyed working with him. It was sometimes he would call at just the wrong time. But I would always try and find a way to fit him in. But I know the word commitment has been thrown around a lot here today, and Richard was a committed person, especially to this longhouse. It made me think, the year before last, my wife and I were coming back from visiting relatives in Wisconsin and Illinois, and we stopped at the Black Hills in South Dakota to see what the progress of the Crazy Horse Memorial was. And if you've ever been there, you realize Crazy Horse was committed too. He was committed to protecting his land and his people. And Richard has that level of commitment.
Such a wimpy voice, I have to use this thing. First of all, I want to tell Richard Jr. how wonderful it is to have him here. That he came all this way to be a part of this celebration, and I sincerely hope that you will take away good memories from all of this. And then I want to just add another thing. I had the privilege of working with Richard for several years on the Longhouse Committee while we were getting through this process, and I just have to say how many times we encounter a problem or an issue or something, and he'd say, "I'll take care of that." we can count on him. I'll take care of that, and he would. But I want to mention a special thing that he did that adds, I think, another dimension to who he was. We lost a dear friend, a member of our community, a member of the Longhouse Committee, a member of the LCC faculty. Our friend Jerry Hall passed away after some long illness. And Richard went out of his way to create a memorial to Jerry. So if you have time before you leave today, I might ask you to step out to that side of the Longhouse and see the memorial bench that Richard brought about, so that we won't forget Jerry and his contributions to the Longhouse as well. He was a great guy, that Richard, a fellow Lakota person. We had some good jokes over our heritage. I think that I've never seen a prouder person when he finished his regalia and he wore it to the opening of the Longhouse. He was just truly, truly proud. So when I see that picture that Dean has done with him in his regalia and the superimposed over the Longhouse, it just makes me think that Richard's watching over us and will be. Thank you.
This Longhouse has been a long time coming. A lot of people have put their tears, their hard work, a lot of sometimes animosity towards each other, a lot of pain sometimes, hurtful things said that aren't meant. But what really comes about, it's really here for all people, for all of us, for all students. It's not just Native students. It's for this community. And Richard was about that. Richard kind of came to me a lot in a way because Frank Merrill's my father-in-law. And here, a student I was. And I think he counted on the fact that I would tell him, knowing Frank and being as close to him as I am, what he would have wanted or how he would have wanted things to go, when Richard didn't always feel they were necessarily going that way, but he was willing to fight. He was willing to fight for what he knew was right. And I want you to know that I was curious about his life as a veteran, as a police officer, as a father, what his life was like before he came here, and I'd ask a lot of questions. It hurt him deep in his soul that he felt he had maybe made some mistakes in his life, that you guys weren't as close as you could have been. And know that he longed for you to be in his life more than anything. I think he poured his heart out to his community in a way to kind of make up for some of that. But you really meant the world to him. You really, really did. And I think he's smiling right now because you're here. And he was a really good person. He might have made mistakes in his life like we all have. But he really called for forgiveness for those things, and I hope that you can, in your heart, forgive him and know that he loved you. You know, there were times in the community that we had people that didn't necessarily do things in a good way, and Richard was the person that was willing to investigate or seek out and fix. He was strong. Real strong, even when he could barely walk. You know, his back was really bad, and lots of surgeries. Diabetes was bad. You know, it didn't stop him. And any of us can really learn from that is that's true strength. And I loved him. He would do kind things for my family. You know, 4th of July, we didn't always have a means for a lot, and he'd show up with big boxes of fireworks for my kids. Sometimes, you know, we just were having hard times, and he'd show up and say, what can I do to help you? Can I help you pay this bill, or can I just, whatever, you know? And he really is the bones of this place. You know, and he supported Frank in a way that I don't know anybody else really has, in the sense that sometimes we don't do things in the right way. We don't say things the way we really mean. Sometimes we say things because we're bitter or frustrated, or we don't really know the right words to get through to somebody. And he was able to see through that and see what it really was going on, what he was really wanting for this longhouse. It wasn't about the glory of the one man. It was really about the community. You know, years ago, many years ago, before Frank even worked here, his brother had a drum group together, and we would drum in the cafeteria. And when his brother was no longer able to do that, we took over. Long before me and his son ever were together. We've been together now 21 years and have 3 kids. But before that, it wasn't even necessarily students. There was a lot of us young kids that were 8, 9, 10 years old, just wanting to know what it meant to be a Native person. To be able to sit at a drum, or to be able to just hear a song. What it even meant just to have the strength as a community to stand out there for hours and dance on cement to raise money so that you could just have a gathering. You know, many times we were told we were too loud, or the students upstairs could hear us, or, you know, we needed to go somewhere else, and this was our community. This was where we belong. And that's where his dream came from, was we are Native people here, and we should be recognized, and we should be able to be okay to be here. And Richard saw that. And he would come to me sometimes just mad because he didn't think things were going right. He'd say, what do you think? What should we say? What should we do? And I go, here, I'm just a young person going, well, I don't know. I mean, this is the way I see it. It's the way I saw it as a young person before all of this even started to come about. It's been a lot of years, this longhouse coming together, not just the last 10, it's been 25, 30 years. And I'm thankful for Richard. I'm thankful. He was really, really special. Yeah, he really, really loved you.
My name is Billy Miro. Every time I dance, Richard would follow me around on the dance floor sometimes. He'd get in front of me and take pictures. Just wanted to get that right picture. He said I was moving too fast. Or he moved too, I couldn't get it good. He'd go back out there and pose for me, and I would do it. That's what Richard had at heart of soul. He would do it in front of me. He's a lawyer, and he's up there now looking down at you and all of your family and all of us right now. Taking care of us still. No matter he's not here, his spirit's going to watch over you. And he's going to guide you in your journey and make you stronger. He is the strongest person I ever met to go through what he done and then be there for everybody. When anybody needed him, all you had to do is call Richard. He'd come. I didn't have money one time to go to a powwow. He knew I liked to dance, so he came over and he says, here's $50. You don't have to give it back. I just want you to go to the powwow. You know, not too many people out of their hearts give you something to know that. Everybody in the world wants something back. Richard never wanted nothing back. He just wanted to have it. And he was the greatest person I ever met. Well, I'm gonna play a song, because I wanna, you always like me playing my songs up here. I always play it every day up here at school. So I'm just gonna play the song for Richard, just let him go alive.
Can't read the whole thing, I know.
I can't help about just one more paragraph. Sitting over there and looking at his regalia, and I see that, and it reminded me of when we went to Washington, D.C. Richard took a bunch of pictures of the veterans memorial over there, and I just feel like he's a veteran himself, and I think this paragraph will touch a little bit on that part of his life. And so I'll just read a little bit about it. Richard was in the Republic of South Vietnam in 1968. He was under fire and never been so scared in his whole life. It's a feeling that no one person can really describe. It would have been to be experienced. And believe him, he has tried many times to put it on paper. What he does have is close, but it's not complete. One time, he fell out of a helicopter in Vietnam. He was on a raid up north on his way back, and the captain he flew with loved to fly down the middle of the valley and make birds, helicopters sound sick. Charlie, the Vietnamese/bad guys, as we put it at the time, would shoot at him. Richard and his crew would turn around and come back and blow the place up. They would raise all kinds of heck. This time they got hit and they were going down near the South China Sea. There was no doubt about that, so they started dumping out all their gear overboard, hoping to get a little bit further away, and the pilot realized it wasn't working. The pilot demanded Richard and his crew to bail out at about 50 feet above the water. Richard was hanging on, just about ready to jump. All of a sudden, his bird went down sideways, and now he was in midair, floating outside the bird. He seemed to be okay with the situation because he was just busting a gun. It definitely hurt like hell, especially hitting the water at a certain angle. What really made him mad was when Richard and his friend, the two gunners, swam into the beach. He says, "Don't ever swim in combat boots." So they reached the beach, and their pilot and co-pilot were already there, sitting up there with a bunch of Marines drinking a beer. He about killed them when he got his hands on them. And, he talked about his time being there at the California Department of Corrections of San Quentin State. And he talked a little bit about how he met Charles Manson and how, that they had this meeting and, how scary he was. And, but in the end, he knew that he wasn't such a scary person after all. But that's just what I wanted to share, part of him when he was back in the day a vet.
I had absolutely no plans to speak today, so I'm going to be completely unprepared. But I am going to help to satisfy a little curiosity about who he was before he came here. My father was a wounded warrior in every sense of the word. He was a gentle soul who went into a war he was unprepared for and came home, tried to start a life, tried to start a career, and couldn't. He was too wounded. I know very, very little about my father because I didn't know where he was for most of my childhood.
His descent into alcoholism was his way of dealing with all of the pain that he brought back with him. His parents were a little older when he came along. He was a little older when I came along, and I didn't get to know them very well either. So the Archambault family for me has been a mystery for many years. I finally really did start to connect with him in probably the end of my teen years. I was finishing high school and wanted to know where he was, and we finally were able to track him down and kind of encouraged him on the road to begin sobriety. And he did that quite successfully. I don't know that he's had a drink since 1992. You all have seen how private he was, how little he spoke of himself. And the same could be said on our side of the family, where we didn't hear much about you. So, my biggest fear for him was that he was here and he was alone. And he was continuing to isolate himself and continuing to just be wounded. And I've come to know, as I have cleaned out his house and met people one-on-one and now see this room full of people, that his wounds were healing. And he has made a home for himself here and created a family for himself here. And you all loved him very well. And for that, I thank you. Because he may not have been able to tell me, but I can see it. And it means the world to me and to my mother and to the rest of the family that you cared for him. So thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm Don Day. Richard was a brother of mine in many more ways than we know or have heard about. He just spoke about his sobriety time. We were the same age. Richard was my brother in alcoholism, drug abuse, that's me. I lived in Vietnam, 1967, and that's what I brought back with me. And I spent some 30 years going around the bottom of the bottle, trying to find who I was. I've been given a gift, and that came from my sobriety. One day I turned my life over to Queen and decided to take it her way. And one of those gifts brought me here to Wayne Community College. I had the opportunity to meet Richard through the U.S. Forest Service at their office. He was looking for someone to help split some cedar logs. And I asked him what he was looking for. And he had no idea. I said, what do you want? He didn't know if he wanted to run through a mill or split them by hand. Traditional is what I do, traditional work. And I had that opportunity to share that with him. And the students here at this facility, contractors that were building a steel building next door, the Forest Service, were all a great part of it. Richard pulled that together by his asking for a little bit of help, by asking for a knowledge that he didn't have. And it's in the adjoining room. And I'm sure that he would be greatly appreciated if you visited the room and touched the wall. Run your hands over the wall. All of the planks in that room are hand manicured, which means they're finished by hand. There's no sanding on that or anything. It's all done by hand. It was my privilege to share that with this facility with Richard and everybody that was wanting to be a part of that. Richard was a great brother and a family member of mine. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Jeff? Yeah.
Yeah.
My eyes over there couldn't
I
see
didn't
that.
know that. I'm not sure.
Richard and I were both veterans. I was in 66 or 69. And we shared the pain with my husband, who was in there for death cancer in 68 or 69. Without Richard, I don't know that we could have gotten to where we are today with my husband. Richard had a way of putting me at ease, the deal with the pastor's paper. It still has. And it is a pain that I will have long after my husband is gone. The other thing we share is how he brought people together to help him. Can you do me this little favor? It's really not, it's not a big deal. He knew that my family is in Hawaii, and that they have over 100 trucks that they transport. He said, you want to go down and pick up some log stores for maybe about 3 trucks. Sure enough, I got my people, my family to load in the trucks. We brought the logs out to the logs. There was no mill in this area that turned into what we needed. So we had to load them back up and take them to, I believe we went to Albany. Don't you remember where we went? Anyway, I think we ended up going up to get them turned. Of course, we needed to bring them back. So we needed block trucks again. But that's how this got done. This got done because he worked with you. And we all had the same desire to do things for community. And I'm glad you're here to get to know that. I know how hard it is for Vietnam veterans to share.
What a blessing everyone has shared with us today. Thank you all for coming up to share your memories and your thoughts. Richard, you especially, I know you said you meant to come up here, but thank you. We'll be eating soon. Please rise, we'll have a closing drum song and prayer. And as you listen to the drum, please know that the drum beat is the heart that we all share. And as we come to understand, Richard's heart beats strong in all of us and in this building. And perhaps you can find your own way to pray along with the drum. Think about Richard, think about friendship, think about family. And that'll be a blessing for the food that we'll be eating as well. So give thanks to all the ways that we're blessed in this room and on this earth. Thank you, Frank, for this song.
after the blessing for dinner. I think the food will start over at that end of the building. So you can line up over that way. The elders first, please.
We all came here for a special reason. The strength that we use took a lot of each and every one of us. The food that we're about ready to receive will give us that nourishment back so we can gain and go on and keep the memories and the strength that we need to survive. We all understood great things today and heard great things. And now, in your own way, and who you speak to, follow me. Aho, grandfather, grandmother, great spirits of our people, we come here today for this celebration. Grandfather, we thank you for this beautiful day that you gave us. The man that we honor always brought sunshine and warmth into our hearts. And grandfather, you gave us this day. Now, grandfather, bless this food that we're about to receive, so the strength that we get, we could carry on the tradition that you gave us. Follow the ways of our people throughout the land, and remember the ones that's not here today. Bless them as they make their journey throughout life. Keep them safe, keep them strong. Look after us, grandfather, in a very special way, because grandfather, we're humble people. Keep us out of them dark holes, grandfather, because them dark holes will one day overtake us. So shine that light down into these holes so that we can rise and enjoy life like we're supposed to, sharing and caring for one another. Honor and respect the things around us and the things that you gave us. So grandfather, grant us this time the nourishment that we need to understand and respect the things you gave us. Aho, grandfather, aho. May I have you kneel?